Most people's fear is the fear that they fear the most. Let's talk about it. Driven Mofos, welcome back to another episode of The Underestimated Entrepreneur. If you're new to this channel, you'll probably be aware that our community is called The Driven Mofos. The reason why we have the community called The Driven Mofos is because most people in this community are driven to achieve more and driven to live a great life. And so I've been speaking to people lately and they're like, I don't feel like I'm a driven mofo because, sometimes I have these self-sabotage patterns and sometimes I procrastinate and all this. But when you compare them to the average population, they're actually super driven. They just don't see it. So most driven mofos that I meet don't even realize that they're driven because they expect so much from themselves. So I just thought I'd clarify that before we start. Anyway, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Michael Mojo, founder of Mojo Human Performance Institute, where we focus on mindset, lifestyle, and business hacking for driven mofos. The reason why I do these episodes is that most people waste their life, and I don't want you to be one of them. I want you to get out there, crush it, achieve your dreams, achieve your goals, make sure you're focusing on a mission and living a life that most people just dream about living. So anyway, let's get into it today. We're talking about fear and why most people, their fear is actually the thing that triggers their fear. So this came up because I had someone message me on social media and they said, Michael, I've got a lot of anxiety and, I stress all the time and all of this sort of stuff. And when we broke it down and when I helped them work through it, what was happening was it was their fear of fear and their fear of anxiety or their stress of anxiety and their fear of getting social anxiety or their fear of feeling tired and shit that was actually triggering them to feel those feelings. So when they would go out, they would fear social anxiety, which then would put them into a state of fear and it would trigger their anxiety. I've worked with plenty of other people over the years as well, where they might fear, like let's say the fear of financial destruction, or they might have a fear of struggling financially. Yet that fear is the thing that stops them from taking action and making change, which then becomes their greatest fear, which now they're financially broke and stuck because they're not making the decisions to help themselves grow financially. So most people's fear and the fears that they fear the most are actually the things that they live, which is why it keeps triggering that fear over and over and over again. If you set realistic goals and realistic expectations from yourself and life in general, it tends to deal with a lot of the anxieties that people have. It tends to deal with a lot of the fears that people have, and it tends to reduce a lot of the stress that most people have from turning from eustress to distress. Now, eustress is good stress. It's spelled E-U and then the word stress. So eustress is good stress. And humans and all living organisms need good stress to grow. So we need good stress and we need beneficial stress consistently in order to grow. Just like we need pressure in order to expand as people. And so without pressure and stress, we don't expand and we don't grow. And so most people suffer because they avoid trying to grow and they avoid the stress and the pressure of growth. That happens a lot. I talk to people on the phone and they're like, Michael, I'd love to come to one of your events and I would love to get the outcome as in, I'd love to get clear with these results in life and I would love to be more financially stable, or I would love to get ahead financially, or, I'd love to grow my business, or I'd love to, have a better relationship, or I'd love to break my relationship patterns that I have where I keep self-sabotaging and shit like that. Or I would love to break my health patterns. They would love to do it. And then you go, right, now it's time to make a commitment and make a decision. And obviously there's a financial commitment there because there's a value exchange going on. So it comes to that point and then they start to shit their pants and freak out because they go, now I've got to learn and I've got to grow. And so they start to become afraid of the pressure and stress of change. And then what will happen is they create smoke screens. So they sit there and they'll go, oh yeah, but I got to check with my partner and I've got to, I got to check whether the dates work and I've got to check whether my cat's going to be okay. And I've got to check whether my star signs align, and they make up all this bullshit, right? It's all bullshit. And for anyone who's worked in sales or who understands human behavior, it's all fucking bullshit, right? The truth is that those same people who make excuses are always making excuses for some reason. And they're putting off doing things, which is the reason why they're struggling and they need to do it in the first place. What normally happens is it triggers their fear of stress and it triggers their fear of more pressure. And so they back off. Instead of pushing harder into the pressure and instead of pushing harder into the stress, in order to grow and expand into the person that they have the capacity to becoming. And instead of becoming stronger mentally and stronger emotionally, and potentially even stronger physically, they back away from it, which then makes them mentally weaker and emotionally weaker. And so most people, as they get older, get mentally and emotionally weaker and get mentally and emotionally more volatile, which then means they become grumpy and bitter and upset and frustrated and withdrawn. And all of those things happen because they don't have the capacity to push into stress and pressure in order to create that growth and that change within them. So now coming back to the anxiety thing, when you look at anxiety, anxiety is normally an idea or a thought process or a perception that someone has that something in the future is going to lead to some sort of negative consequence or negative effect. And normally there's a time pressure in there as well that triggers the anxiety. I won't get into that in this episode. I'll go into it in another episode. But this has been heavily debated. But after working with probably at least hundreds, if not thousands of people who have anxiety issues. They're the same patterns that happen over and over and over again. Something in the future that they're expecting to happen or that they think is going to happen that they don't really have any data on whether it will happen or not happen. And so they generalize it. Then normally there's a time pressure there as well, which then they're in a rush to get out, get away, run away, or think about something that may or may not happen. So it might be the fear of an economic crash, or it might be, the fear of being late, or the fear of being judged, or the fear of being criticized, or the fear of not being able to live their values. So that'll normally trigger an anxiety response. But the thought process of maybe having that anxiety response actually triggers the anxiety within them. And so now they have an anxiety response to the anxiety. A lot of people also have a fear response to fear. They also have a stress response to stress. They also have a depressed response to feeling depressed, or the thought of feeling depressed. So they're actually self-perpetuating this idea within their own head that something's going to happen that may or may not happen. They just don't have data points, and they generalize, and then their emotional state drops them down into a part of the brain called the amygdala, which is the emotional center. So instead of thinking logically, they now start thinking emotionally. And when emotions are high, intelligence is low in that moment because they use different parts of the brain based on neuroscience. So that's why when someone is emotional, they'll tend to be more volatile, or they tend to won't look at things logically. They'll tend to just erupt and react and act in certain ways. So this is something to just think about, driven mofos, because I'm sure that for a lot of you out there, if you just sat back and even grabbed a pen and paper and wrote down, what are my actual current fears? What are my current stresses? What are my current anxieties? What are the current emotional ruts and lows that I'm having? And then also, how am I going to work through these and break these patterns? And how can I grow with some stress and with some pressure in order to grow out of these patterns? Because you don't just change those patterns, you actually grow out of them. You expand out of them. The same as problems. You don't just change problems, you actually have to grow out of your problems. And if you're not consistently growing out of the problems and becoming the person that you need to become in order to solve those problems, then you won't solve those problems. You'll just go back to doing what you've always done, and that problem will stay around. This is why most people's financial problems will always be the same problem. Someone says to me, Michael, I can't afford to do one of your events. I know I'll call them in 2 years and they'll still be in the same fucking position because they haven't changed. Unless something miraculous happens, 1 out of every 100 people, something changes, right? They make a different decision. But for most people, they're pretty predictable. They'll be exactly the same person. I've seen people in relationship issues where they just keep dating the same person with a different name, with a different haircut, but they're taking the same person into the relationship every time, which is them with their same patterns. They have the same fears, the same stresses. So I know that if they don't make a change, they're just going to be the same person. And so I can call them in 2 years and they still say, oh yeah, man, my relationships, women are shit, or women are stupid, or, you can't trust men. And they just go through these same patterns because that's all they know, and they don't make the real changes needed because they're afraid of the pressure and the stress of making a different decision and a different commitment. But anyway, driven mofos, I really hope that helps. If this stuff is resonating with you, at the moment we have 5 spaces available at the moment for our next intake of our Business Growth Odyssey. If you're loving this podcast and you want to grow your business, and your business has a turnover in between anywhere around about $200,000, $250,000 a year turnover, up to about 10 million, please shoot me a message. Our goal is to help your business to grow to that $10 million mark, but also for you as a business owner to become operationally free, where the business doesn't rely on you all the time. So we start helping you to put in the systems, the processes, the infrastructure. You'll get a lot of training. You'll be setting your goals for the next 90 days consistently by coming to the event. And you'll be hanging around a whole bunch of other driven business owners as well that want to grow. And we've had some amazing results in that event as well, where a lot of the business owners are growing consistently year after year after year and have consistent growth above that of the normal economy. And then we have some business owners that just get in there and absolutely crush it. I know Adam Lillycrap sent me a message a little while ago from All Gen Solutions, the owner of a generator business here in South Australia that does maintenance and generation repairs and installs. And they grew 162% since starting Business Growth Odyssey 12 months ago. So there is room for massive growth. So if this sounds like you and you're interested, no obligation, just send me a message on any of my social media platforms and just say, hey Mojo, I'm keen to chat about Business Growth Odyssey. We'll tee up a call. We'll just make sure that it's right for you. I don't pressure people into doing that course because I've got to make sure that you are going to be the right fit for that course, because it's a money back guarantee that if you don't get growth, you get your money back. So we've got to make sure that you're going to grow. Shoot me a message on socials if that sounds like you and it resonates with you as well and you really do want to grow your business. And also if you want to break free from the traps that most business owners have every day of being stuck in the operational side of their business, where they're always working in their business and they're not so much just the director or the head of the business that can just sort of delegate tasks day to day and just cruise along instead of having, a million things to do every day and stressing out because the systems and the processes and the ops aren't there and all that stuff. So we'll help you to be able to start to implement that stuff as well. So anyway, shoot me a message on socials if that resonates with you. Anyway, Driven Mofos, have a great day. Keep crushing it and keep kicking ass. Thank you for all of those who have rated and reviewed this podcast as well. It really helps. Anyway, thanks, Driven Mofos. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you back on here on the next episode.